Oh, the conference season is among us, but we've got a whole episode to break down maybe the best weekend of non-conference play all year. We had 3 top 5 matchups, 3 attendance records broken. It was a delight to just sit back. I had a lot of work this weekend. I was scrambling, trying to cover all the matches and follow everything and broadcast some random other sports. And Mick, oh, let's start this from the top out, don't we? Welcome in. It's 6 rotations. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman, and we cover women's college volleyball week to week. And Mick, well, there are a lot of options where we could start in this episode, but for a shakeup of sorts, as always, brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. We're just going to bring it to you. We're going to give you the top 5. There was a lot of shakeup. Wisconsin reverse swept Florida. Stanford reverse swept Louisville. Nebraska beat Stanford and then took care of Kentucky without a pair of starters. It was a weekend where the top 5 were very familial, and this is our new top 5. And Mick, as the fans look at it and they see Wisconsin won, they don't see what we see, which is that 62 of the 64 first place votes went to the Bucky Badgers, who took care of business against Marquette in an ugly midweek. Where do you sit on where you think this top 5 scatters out?
Well, I actually agree that they're with these 5 teams. I just don't agree with the order. And I'll tell you why. Wisconsin, my prediction is Wisconsin's going to be undefeated until October 21st. When you look at this, their schedule has been lighter than light this year for a normal Wisconsin schedule. They really might have lost to Florida had Stuckey not gone down. But at this point, I have Nebraska being number 1. They have only lost 3 sets during the year. And they're playing a lot of freshmen, and they're really, really good. Wisconsin, on the other hand, has only beaten Florida and has played Baylor and some mid-level teams and good top 20 teams. But they really don't have the schedule for me to give them number 1. I had them actually at number 3. And so I think I like all 5 of these teams. I mean, we could start with Wisconsin. They have been down 0-2 twice in these first 4 weeks. They were down 0-2 to Arkansas and down 1-2 to Tennessee and down 0-2 last night to Florida. And so, I think they're putting it right on the edge. But here's their schedule coming up in the Big Ten coming up. And they have Northwestern, IU, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, Rutgers, Maryland, Ohio State. And Ohio State's 3-6 right now, folks. And they're going to be good down the road, but maybe not this year. So I think that's why Wisconsin's getting a bye here by the coaches, when I think Nebraska, my eye says Stanford's the team you got to watch out for. But then if Florida's healthy, they seem to be able to beat anybody on a given day, and yet they go 3-2 with Florida State this last week.
Sacramento State as well as University of South Florida. Yeah, the Gators have had some heart beaters. But this is it, folks. Hold on to your chairs. This is the episode where Mick is going to give Nebraska fans their flowers. We hear you, we see you every week in the comments on Twitter or X and on YouTube. And I agree. I was texting with a couple people throughout the weekend, and I said, I'm curious to see where things lie after Sunday. And then Florida jumps up 2-0 against Wisconsin. And I'm thinking, okay, I think, regardless of how this match finishes, if Nebraska takes care of Kentucky, they're probably my number 1 team. And then, unfortunately, Lindsey Krause gets involved in a hit and run on Saturday or Sunday, and she can't play on Sunday. And then Choboy, who had the coolest name and match possible in the first win for Nebraska over the weekend against Stanford, she's unavailable. They don't use her. And the Huskers still dominate in that first set against Kentucky. Okay, so you want to talk Wisconsin first. We got so much to cover in a weekend filled. There were a few upsets. There were some standouts. There were, performances for non-ranked teams that we've got to get to at the end. There are still undefeated teams through non-conference play, and I want to touch on those as well. Arizona State has 9 sweeps, 7 straight. They're undefeated. Cal is undefeated, and they get Stanford in a midweek Tuesday to start conference play. Wisconsin, Nebraska, Wyoming, and the Citadel are the last 2 undefeated teams. But how about Bucky? So it was an ugly Wisconsin State record to kick off this fun week. 17,000 to see Marquette play Wisconsin inside the Milwaukee Bucks basketball arena. Ugly match, as I mentioned. They were outserved, by 15 or 16 points. Even Wisconsin fans will say it wasn't their prettiest outing, but they took care of a Marquette team. Then last year, do you remember, Mick? Florida went into the Kohl Center, and it's crazy. It was only a year ago, the most attended regular season volleyball match in Wisconsin. Florida upsets them, and they have the cool little iconic photo on social media. Wisconsin got the revenge, a reverse sweep. The Gators haven't beaten a number 1 team since 2017. And Mick, certainly the storylines sit with Alexis Stuckey injured. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that the star sophomore All-American setter avoided major injury, but Mary Wise said it didn't look good. The Wisconsin native Kennedy Muff stepped up, took him to 5, hang tight in 5 sets. It was 10-all, then 13-10, and then Gigi got smoked on a swing from Anna Dixon at 13-10, but Schmreck and Franklin finished it off, and Wisconsin stays number 1. Moving into Nebraska, I want to kind of pair those together here. The Huskers hit 696 in the second set against Stanford. Stanford stepped up to take the third, avoid the sweep, but Choboy had a play in the 4th set that you will see on highlight reels all year long. Lainey Choboy at 18-15 makes an unreal dig, matched up with Lexi Rodriguez. Berg and Riley, we're trying to get her on the show, waiting to hear back on potentially today, maybe next week, whether it's Bergen or Andy. We're still waiting. Nebraska is real deal. Merritt Beeson is the real deal. The Harper, Jackson, Beeson trio with Bergen feeding to them. It really feels to me, Mick, like this is a team destined to finally snap that skid of national championships here over the last 5 years.
Well, Kentucky's only 2-5, and yet they played some of the fiercest volleyball and unintimidated volleyball that I've seen, and had the momentum going their way through the 3rd set and forced a 4th set, and Nebraska struggled to win that 4th set. I think Kentucky deserves to be where they are, and we can talk about them when we get to them. But I do think that match was an excellent match for Nebraska, and having to play without a couple of kids that they count on really helped them a great deal.
All right, Mick, let's keep it moving. And, as our 5 kind of rolls through, Louisville, another record set in Kentucky as they played Kentucky in front of 12,760 fans in the KFC Yum Center, and then went up 2-0 in the same arena against Stanford and fell. And Stanford came all the way back, and we talked to Cammie Miner, and I want to hear your Louisville and Stanford breakdowns before I give you some of the standout players in that match. Walk me through what you saw from Stanford first against Nebraska. It just didn't feel like the Cardinal had the same firepower as Nebraska in that match. And then they started to wake up against Louisville on Sunday.
Well, what I saw was that they got beat on their own floor by Nebraska. That's what I saw. And I was awed that they wouldn't get it going. But Kip just doesn't seem like she was there mentally, and so you're right. They didn't have the intensity of the Nebraska team. But I'll tell you, it wasn't Stanford's fault at Louisville that they lost the first 2 sets. Louisville played the first 2 sets almost error-free, flawless play, and you can't continue that for 5 sets usually. And obviously they couldn't. And once Stanford got a little help from Louisville, in other words, they gave them a few points, they were able to take charge and get back into that thing. But Louisville played, I think, as well as they can play against Stanford.
Louisville hit over 350 in both of those first two sets. Then they hit under 200 in the last three. But when you look at the stats from the Cardinals, only 20 attack errors in the entire 5-set match. Now, some teams will have 20 attack errors in a set, and it's not like, just to be honest,
They're not going to win if they do that.
Of course, but you'll see it every once in a while. Just 2 attack errors in the 5th set, 3 attack errors in the 4th. But the Cardinal just played better. 464 in the 3rd for Stanford, 400 in the 4th, 429 in the 5th. Katie Baird goes for 23. Kip goes for 18. Rubin 16 in the middle with 481 hitting percentage for Rubin. But Louisville's stats, they were so balanced, right? They still have Anna DeBeer, but she picked up a few errors late in that match that really crushed her stats. But the Looper-Jones connection on the pins are really something that are going to keep Louisville in the center of minds moving towards interconference play. But we're going to talk more about the ACC. The ACC stacked. The SEC is stacked. I'm really loving the way that these power conferences are shaping up for conference play, Mick, because I think the SEC is as good as it's been since I started covering the sport. And the ACC has brought back a bit of that resurgence as Georgia Tech is looking strong. Pittsburgh and Oregon was a phenomenal match as well. But I do think we got to keep it moving a little bit here. How about this, though? This is a fun fact. I got this sent to me. Of the 3 top 5 matches this weekend, the one in Lincoln had the lowest crowd. How about that?
That's pretty amazing.
A sold out 8,500, whatever at Devaney was less than the 9,000 in Louisville, less than the 10,000 in Gainesville. And that is just so heartening to see. It just warms, it just makes you feel good to see that it's not just Nebraska and everyone else in attendance anymore. Fans are starting to show out and show up for, high level, entertaining volleyball. And seeing that crowd in Gainesville, Mick, gives me a lot of hope for Tampa. I'm really hoping that this crowd in Tampa, and you and I are going to be there. We're going to have a lot of fun again. And I really want everyone to try to migrate down to my home state. You're going to love downtown Tampa. It's going to be a great crowd. The fans are going to be fun, and the weather is going to be not freezing, which is really exciting. So I'm hoping that the attendance down in the Amalie Arena can be really fun in December. Now, Mick, let's look at the rest of our top 15 here. And as we pull it up, I think any of these teams could make the Final Four. I think this is as deep of a top 15 as we have had since we started the show.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the next 5 or 6 also, with Oregon, Washington State, Pittsburgh, Texas, BYU. And when Sis is playing for Creighton, you've got to throw Creighton in there because they have 2 legitimate arms that just light it up and a right side that scores the ball also. The question is, where should they be? And we're going to get to that pretty soon, I think, because there are going to be some really good matches in each of these conferences, except for the Big Ten right now. And the Big Ten seems to be Nebraska, Wisconsin, and I don't know if Minnesota's going to show up or not.
Purdue, can hang and bang with anyone. But I think you're right. I think the Big Ten is starting to become, 2 or 3 big matches per month. But aside from that, the other conferences, the Pac-12 for one final season, the Big 12, every weekend in the Big 12 is going to turn into must-watch TV now that they've added BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF. All right, Mick, let's break this down. So Oregon jumps from 7 to 6. They swept Marquette, and then that really wild one against Pittsburgh. I don't know did you catch any of it? I wasn't able to watch any of that Pittsburgh match. I was on a call, but I want to go over a few of the key stats. Did you catch any of it?
Nope. I'm sorry. I couldn't get that one.
No. So yeah, Thursday, 7:00 Eastern time. It was in Pittsburgh. And there was another team in that tournament, the Panther Challenge, that's really talented, right? James Madison. They took Oregon to 5 sets. Oregon actually had to win the 4th set to force 5 against JMU. So let's talk a little bit about this Pittsburgh match. Oregon goes up 2-0, 26-24 in the first, 25-17 in the second. Pitt storms back, hits under 300 in every set does Pittsburgh, and Oregon does as well. They only hit 300 in 1 set. So it was a defensive-minded 25 total blocks kind of match. And for Oregon, 19 kills from Mimi Collier, 19 kills from Morgan Lewis. Not many, it wasn't like the middles necessarily stood tall with 6'1" from Kara McGee. I really think it was a matchup where Valeria Vasquez Gomez couldn't quite get going in the fifth set. She had 12 kills total, and then Stafford and Babcock each with 16. So, we like to try to be candid here. Weren't able to catch the match. Hopefully we'll be able to watch a lot more of those two teams moving forward. But certainly a fun one in a top 10 matchup.
You really think that if Gabby Gonzalez gets going, the transfer from Ohio State for Oregon, that they actually could get into that top 5 group? But they need three ballers out there that are getting double-figure kills all the time. Gonzalez hasn't picked that up to the level that we think that she can do it yet. So that'll be interesting to watch. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, can't seem to get anybody going off, so to speak. They all do their job. They all get double figures, but it just seems to not be quite enough sometimes.
So now as we take a look at what is an interesting 7, 8, 9 here, I'm going to skip over Washington State. I want to give a lot of love to them in a second here. Can you believe that we're in another week where Texas is outside looking in of really like the power teams here? Walk me through it, because, all right, Washington State, they win their 3rd straight top 20 matchup. And Mick, I'm going to give you the floor here for the next few minutes. Break down our preseason, darlings who have now come out and become everyone's kind of dark horse favorite as they came back 16-7. Mick, Texas is up 1-0, 16-7 in the second set. Take the floor.
Yeah, Texas has some problems, but Washington State was phenomenal. I was at the match, watched. Washington State is just going to do nothing but get better. They really have a team where they don't have any major weaknesses. Maybe a little height in the second middle position, but that kid is experienced and she does a really good job, low error. So I watched the match, and Texas takes control of every game and then gives up 3, 4, 5 points in rows, not just 3 in a row, but they have a couple of rotations they can't score. When Winnes comes to the front row and they're in the 6-2, 5-1 with the setter in the front row, they can't seem to score. And Skinner is their only answer out of the back row, and she doesn't seem to be able to carry the team yet. She has her spurts, but then she just can't seem to continue to bring it. And until they get that, that's going to hurt them. The other problem is that Molly Phillips has literally gone to the bench, in my opinion, because the new freshman setter, cannot locate the tempo right on the right side for Phillips. And they brought in the 6'4" Hawaiian kid only because she's got a faster arm. She's bigger, even a little bit taller than Molly, who's 6'3", and can get to those balls, but can't score that ball. So Texas is really trying to win in the middle and the left side without any scores on the right side. And because the setter has trouble with the back set, they can't get Asia O'Neal off of the 1 foot to score like she used to. Until they fix that, in my opinion, they're going to be up and down, and that Big 12 conference is up for grabs. I mean, that's going to be one of the most fun conference battles to watch.
I can't wait, being able to be a part of a lot of these Texas Tech broadcasts. I've got Kansas this weekend. That's going to be a lot of fun to see. We'll get to Kansas in a little bit. Texas winds up hitting negative in the second set, hitting 270 in the first, 250 in the third. 16 kills from Jenna Wennis. You talk about the setter in Ella Swindle. She finishes with just 39 kills. But the real story is on the other side, and it's the blocking, right? 16 blocks from Washington State, 9 of them from Magda Jelarova, the standout superstar senior. Pia Timmer had a bit of an error-filled match, didn't she? 11 kills, 9 errors. But Izanovic steps up with 13 kills. And I'm telling you, Washington State's that team that is going to sneakily hang around. They don't have another big matchup until at Oregon, October 1st. They host Stanford October 8th. I really hope that Bowler Jim can get popping. But a matchup Thursday with Washington, a team that I saw this weekend that is just not that talented. I think Washington State should take care in that Apple Cup kind of matchup there. But, you take care of Baylor, and now obviously Baylor's not looking like the Baylor of old, but still a team that's going to contend in the Big 12 conference. Washington State takes care of BYU at home. Baylor, 5 days later, and then goes and heads after going to Waco. You got to take that trek out to Austin, wins at Texas. Such a fun trek for such a fun team.
And you know what Washington State's done? They've recreated Gregory Gym in Pullman, Washington. Good. They went out, and I heard this, that Jen Greeny went out and raised $800,000, terraflexed the whole building for practice and for games, then brought in bleachers at the end zone, permanent bleachers at the end zone. So they've got a kind of Gregory atmosphere in Pullman now, and it is wild, and they weren't fazed by the Texas fans. In fact, one of the interesting things is they took the fight out of the fans with their constant and persistent play. I thought the Texas fans did not help the home team the way that I think Coach Elliott had hoped they would there.
And let's keep on moving down. Creighton and Minnesota, 11 versus 12. Minnesota drops down. They're now sitting at 4-4, maybe the most overrated team in the polls at 4-4. Whatever you want to talk about that way. But they still, went to 5 with a really talented Creighton team. Creighton hit 400 in a dominant third set. It was a bit of a lopsided effort, right? Creighton takes the first 25-15. Minnesota takes the second 16. Creighton takes the third 20. Then Minnesota, in a must-win set, gets the key kills in the fourth. And from the stats, Ava Martin, right? It was the Ava Martin show. Yeah. And Ava Martin is a standout athlete that I had a little bit kind of written down here, with a no assists matchup and a bit of a revenge factor as well. 2019, Minnesota eliminated Creighton from the tournament. There was only one player on Creighton that was on that 2019 team. It was Kiana Schmidt, who had 10 kills, including the match winner, as the Blue Jays defeat the Golden Gophers. And Creighton now looking like a top 10 team. They're sitting here at 11. They're certainly a top 10 caliber team.
But is there anybody that doesn't like Minnesota's talent? I mean, no, right? Minnesota has plenty of talent there. That's why I say maybe when they need to go a little bit longer in the conference and get that going. But at 4-4, they played a good schedule. They haven't been necessarily bad, but they really haven't played to their talent potential yet. So if they don't get it going pretty soon, that's going to be a hard one. The Big Ten will become alive, though, if Minnesota catches on. Ohio State plays above this freshman talent level that they've got, and Purdue gets their middles in so that they can come and bring some fury to the fight here, so to speak.
Well, we got a weekend to figure it out, don't we? Nebraska versus Ohio State, Friday night, 9:00 Eastern on BTN, and then Nebraska versus Minnesota, Sunday night, 7:30 Eastern on BTN. So a chance right this weekend to see how this conference can kind of shake out, whether it is going to be super top heavy and the Huskers are going to roll through both those matchups, or if there will be a little bit more of that 4-6 magic that the Big Ten usually conjures up. How about Creighton? They usually dominate these poor Big East teams, and it's just Creighton versus Marquette every year, undefeated or one loss. Friday night, Creighton at Butler in that historic Hinkle Fieldhouse against Kyle Shondell, my buddy Tyler, the assistant coach, Tyler Goldstein out there. The Bulldogs, hey, you never know. Put them on a little bit of upset alert, but what you guys are wanting is October 6th at Marquette. That's going to be the really tough one for Creighton. As we kind of tiptoe down here, we can't cover all the teams, but how about Georgia Tech falling to Georgia? Excuse me. Big upset weekend in Atlanta. We thought Georgia Tech was going to go through conference play undefeated. It's Georgia's first win in Atlanta since 2014.
Yeah, and then Georgia falls 2 nights later. They get beat. So it's just the strangest thing, but Georgia Tech has to show up all the time. That's been really the thing with Georgia Tech. And they have a little younger team, but that in-state rivalry, they have to show up for that, and they have to win that as well as get ready for the conference. But how about the ACC conference with those guys in there? Pittsburgh, Louisville, all of those teams are ready to do battle this year. And so,
yeah, Florida State, Miami are always going to kind of hang around and be competitive. Let's kind of tiptoe through the SEC here because there's a really fun week coming up, all on national TV. It feels like Missouri versus Tennessee Wednesday night on ESPN2. Following that, how about BYU Houston, a pair of top 25 teams, both playing in their first Big 12 matchup. That's on ESPN2 at 9 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. Then Tennessee is going to have a fun one on ESPN Sunday against Kentucky. And this is a Tennessee team that did not have the toughest non-conference slate, right? Just Wisconsin in a really fun 5-set match. They also took care of San Diego, a team that has kind of struggled here following their Final Four season, and a sweep over Marquette. But Tennessee, how do you feel about the Vols? I really only watched them in that one Wisconsin match. But, Janasia Moore, the transfer from Ohio State, has stood tall as the standout. She hit 500 in the last match she played in this weekend. And I remember her jumping out of the gym in Columbus.
Well, I think the reason that the coaches are ranking Tennessee high is not because of their quality of play right now, but their athleticism. This is one of the most athletic teams in the country. And if they start to reduce errors, their problem has been just errors. They go along, they play really, really well. And if they don't reduce errors, they're not going to beat Kentucky right now because Kentucky seems to have it going in the right direction. Their block is really improved. They're good at the net. And of course, Rutherford just continues to bang balls. It looks like she can hit 60 balls every night. And that makes Kentucky good. But Tennessee will have to deal with that. I think the team that's overrated a little bit is number 15, Penn State. I really have them much lower. I have them as far down there as 21, one, because of their schedule, and two, just they can't score the ball. And I think the coaches are putting them a little bit higher than they maybe need to be. Arkansas is another one. They get credit for playing Wisconsin twice. They were up 2-0 on Wisconsin at Arkansas, but couldn't finish it out. Wouldn't swing when they had a chance to win there that first night. So Arkansas is a good team. They're well coached, probably deserve to be in the middle. And then you've got Kansas, who can score the ball, and they may get better. They have 3 outsides. They can rotate around. They have 3 left side attackers that can score. So I like all of those people, but I think Baylor's better than people are giving them credit for. They have that freshman left side. Once she gets a little bit more consistent, she'll score the ball. And I think Baylor will be in the hunt in the Big 12.
So let's take a look at the 16 through 25, our entire top 25. I do think it's tough because teams like Penn State and Arkansas just had very soft finishes to their non-conference slate. So I do think we'll learn a lot about them. The question is, will the SEC beat themselves up? Will Arkansas get upset? They have a very awkward start to conference play. South Carolina, A&M, Auburn, LSU. None of those teams are going to, hit you out of the gym, but might you get an upset on the road in a sleepy, Wednesday matchup in Baton Rouge? Or, for example, Florida's got to go and play Auburn with a backup setter. There's going to be some moments coming. Arkansas has a very back-heavy schedule. They don't play Tennessee till the end of October, Kentucky end of October, Florida end of October. And then again, Florida and Kentucky in end of November. So there's a chance that Arkansas and Tennessee can kind of stay in this middle teens part of the hunt. And you talk about the Big 12 with Kansas and Baylor. How about Purdue? Purdue, they put viewership ratings above all, it feels like, don't they? It's always an incredible, exhilarating, wild 5-set thriller. And it was USC that upset Purdue. USC has now won 5 straight. It was a 5-set match that had match challenges left and right. And what do we have that? That was a couple weeks ago. The same kind of thing happened for Purdue, where like every set
Purdue and Kansas. Purdue and Kansas.
And it happens
3 challenges on the last point.
And so USC practically won all 3 sets. Emily Eamon was texting me about it. She was on the call with CJ Vosters. All 3 sets were pretty much won because of challenges. So that's tough. But Skylar Field showed out with 27 kills. Purdue would bounce back to sweep a good UCF team 2. Kansas, they just won their 7th straight match. They're rolling. I get to see them firsthand Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN Plus. Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern on the Plus as well. I'll be on the call for Kansas against Texas Tech. A lot, the jury's still out on a lot of these teams. Arkansas nearly got upset by St. John's, but they avoided it. And then here at the bottom of the poll, Mick, as we take a look, we've talked a lot about Ohio State and Kentucky. Dayton stays pat in a bit of a soft schedule. Western Kentucky jumps back in. And Mick, did you catch this one? Western Kentucky in a win over a good Western Michigan team. Paige Briggs, who's been there forever, 35 kills. And so if you can get performances like that, that can certainly keep you relevant.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave Houston out of that last group because they're quiet right now, and I'm not sure what they're doing, but they have a lot of talent, and I look for them to make a lot of noise in the Big 12 as well. And I like that whole group of teams. I mean, you could have a conference of just that group of teams from Georgia Tech down to Dayton. And I do like Dayton. I don't care about their schedule as much as I like the way they played against Louisville. They gave Louisville everything they wanted in a 3-2 loss there at Dayton. I like that group of teams a lot. The jury's out for me with Auburn, Iowa State, and Western Kentucky. Those three I think would be interesting to have them play each other and see how they would finish, but I do think they deserve to be in the top 25. You had mentioned Arizona State when you started. They're the next ones that got votes, 52 as a matter of fact, and they are winning. JJ has got them winning out there, but boy, they sure haven't played a schedule that would be a top 100 schedule. So I think once he gets into the Pac-12 competition, it'll be interesting to see if Arizona State's for real or not.
Yeah, so Western Kentucky does not replace anyone in the poll. They are exactly tied with 57 points with Iowa State, 5 points ahead of Arizona State. Marquette, USC, Duke are the next couple teams on the outside looking in. Dayton is not going to play any top 50 teams for the rest of the season, so it'll be interesting to see. It'll be kind of like what Western Kentucky did, 4 or 5 years ago before Rice really became prominent and WKU would kind of just run rampant through the CUSA. So interested to see how that'll work out for Dayton. Houston, as you mentioned, just 2 losses. They beat USC on opening weekend. They just beat a good Texas A&M team. And a Wednesday night matchup at BYU is going to tell us so much about whether Houston really has the gall to hang in that field house in Provo. So I'm very curious to see how that will go. And yes, Iowa State, just one more Big 12 team that stays down there. I mentioned the undefeateds earlier. We've got Arizona State, Cal, who faces Stanford on Tuesday night, and then Wisconsin, Nebraska, Wyoming, and the Citadel. Eastern Illinois was undefeated. They beat Missouri in the first matchup of the weekend, and then Mizzou got them back with a fun one. And I wanted to make a little bit of a notice here. There was a fun weekend in Hawaii, Mick. I don't know if you caught your Texas transfer, and Melanie Parra had 27 kills in the win over Hawaii, and then 34 kills to beat Florida State a couple of days later. Wild weekend for Parra. As
she can do that.
Hawaii.
She can do that, and you think, boy, she's going to do this every night, and then sometimes nobody home. So I want to see Melanie do that every night. I think that's why TCU is so excited. They think that they can get that kind of performance out of her by midseason, and so that's pretty exciting. I wanted to say that Iowa State got upset. Was it Drake that they got upset by?
Yeah, I've got it here. Iowa State got upset by UC Santa Barbara, and then Drake
Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah, and beat them quite handily, 3-0 or 3-1. Yeah. So I don't know if we watch Santa Barbara or we worry about Iowa State. They're in that Big 12 conference also, and so that's another one to be concerned about. But I wanted to tell you, I want to remind people to watch the Cal-Stanford match because Maggie Lee from Beijing,
China, if we can watch it, Pac-12 network.
Yeah, is the freshman on that Cal team, and I'm telling you, she can score in the 30s, even against Stanford. And I'm sure Stanford's worried about that, but that makes Cal a serious contender in any match in the Big Pac-12. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Santa Barbara. You've got Hawaii that just swept Florida State. I mentioned that. You know, Cal Poly's in that conference. I do a lot of their matches. Not quite sure that they're going to be able to hang, but they took Washington to 5 sets, and then they beat St. Mary's in 5 sets before Pepperdine took care of them in a tight sweep. Lastly, though, and this is a really fun one, before we get to our favorite match of the weekend, UNC Greensboro, their middle blocker, Deja Jackson, had the surprise of a lifetime before their match against Charlotte on Friday. Her father, Mr. Jackson, surprised her back from the military. You know, I have goosebumps talking about it. Certainly recommend you guys go and look it up on social media. Daiji, Deja Jackson. Always love those videos. They put it up on the board. It was a message from her dad, and then he walked into the gym, and I just wanted to shout it out because I love that. She then followed up with 5 kills, 1 error in 12 swings. But UNCG has not had the most memorable of a season, so really fun to see that. And then Mick, in honor of Deion Sanders, sorry, Deja Jackson. In honor of Deion Sanders and Colorado's epic win over Colorado State, they had a fun one for the Golden Spike where Colorado State won in Boulder on a reverse sweep. And then the next day they played in Colorado State, and Colorado won on a reverse sweep. So they had a crazy weekend. And then obviously Colorado beats Colorado State in double overtime on the football side of things. So I love to see that. That was a lot of fun to see. A lot of upsets this weekend, right? Georgia Tech got upset. Iowa State gets upset. Purdue gets upset. And then you've got, you know, a couple of the near upsets. Auburn survived a thriller against South Alabama in 5. And BYU was put to a test against Utah, and that'll carry us into our last segment, our favorite matches of the weekend. Give me Baylor BYU on Saturday, right? We talked about BYU Houston. Baylor BYU is going to be a lot of fun as well, and in another kind of new welcome to the Big 12 matchup.
Yeah, I think that'll be a really good match, and that crowd gets really rowdy there at Provo. So, but Baylor's used to that, and what I want to see is how Baylor weathers that and how they come out, because if they come out of there with a win, then Baylor's for real. And then the Big 12 has really got something going, because, you know, BYU is going to play well in that conference, and they're going to be in the top half. And so it's going to be interesting on who gets left out.
And then, you know, a couple more notable ones, right? Florida, Auburn on Friday. We talked about Ohio State, Nebraska. How about the last matchup for Texas and Oklahoma before they both head to the SEC? That's going to be Friday night. Should be a smooth sailing for Texas and company. And then Minnesota, Nebraska on Sunday, Oregon, UCLA on Sunday. And then those 2 Tennessee matchups, Missouri Wednesday on ESPN2, Kentucky Sunday on ESPN. Tennessee's getting that a little bit of love from the national TV side of things, so hopefully they can show out with the top 20 moniker. And you know, the Texas Rice, we didn't talk at all about that. Texas smoked Rice last week, so I'm not quite sure.
That was a Monday night match, and and I just don't think Rice has the talent to stay with Texas this year. They played them pretty tough the last 3 or 4 years, but I think they need to add 1 or 2 more talented players to get in that ball game. And something that you mentioned, Oklahoma playing, you know, Oklahoma took UCLA out in the first of 2 matches, and then UCLA came back the next night and beat Oklahoma. But Oklahoma is not the old Oklahoma. They are out there competing at a very high level. So everybody's got to be careful going into Oklahoma to play now, because they're new coach, brothers at Kansas State, and that battle should come pretty soon, and that will be one that we'll want to follow, the brothers playing there, Kansas State and Oklahoma.
That'll be on ESPN Plus. Great weekend. Conference weekend starts. So much to find out about these teams. Thank you so much, as always, for sitting with us for a little over a half an hour. He's Mick, and I'm Daniel. Have a great week. This is 6 Rotations.